26 Main Street by Ripley. Why did I agree to this? Dylan Kessel asked himself. The answer came immediately. Because I need a damn job. Dylan nodded and glanced around. Main Street, Anger, New Hampshire, seemed to be abandoned. The street itself wasn't particularly long or impressive, and only a few buildings stood out. Town Hall being one of them, and Dylan's destination, the Odd Fellows building, being the other. Standing at the corner of Main and Elm, Dylan felt as though eyes were watching him, despite the fact that all the businesses were closed and the parking spaces empty. In the early morning light, the street lamps flickered and went out one by one as the sun rose higher over the horizon. Dylan took his phone out of his pocket, opened his email, and read the invitation again. Dear Mr. Kessel, we hope this letter finds you well. We are pleased to inform you that we have received your portfolio. Your designs and illustrations would serve us quite well, and we would like to meet with you in order to discuss salary, benefits, etc. If this is agreeable to you, please arrive at 26 Main Street, Anger, New Hampshire, promptly at 6:30 a.m. We, here in the Odd Fellows building, start work bright and early. We regret to say that the only parking currently available is in the community lot, which is located behind the Anger Library. Sincerely, Jonathan M. Hurst, President, Anthropophagi, LLC. Dylan had never heard of Mr. Hurst or of Anthropophagi, LLC, but it didn't matter. His landlord wanted money, as did various utilities and insurance, not to mention his body's constant demands for food. So, he thought, let's go negotiate a salary. For the first time since the receipt of the email, Dylan felt excited. Work had been sporadic, and a point of contention with Deborah, his last girlfriend. She had sacrificed her own love of art to take a job with Fidelity in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Deborah had wanted him to do the same. Their art, she assured him, could take place after hours. Dylan had disagreed, and his vehemence in defending his position had cost him the relationship. Whatever, Deb, he thought, feeling a bittersweet pang with possible victory a short distance away. I've got my job, and I didn't have to quit on a dream. Dylan adjusted the strap of his satchel and looked ahead to where the Odd Fellows building dominated the corner of Main Street and Pine. Okay, he thought, time to do this. Dylan strode down the sidewalk until he stood in front of the building's entrance. There was a small sign in the glass of the door which read, "Pardon our appearance, we're going through a makeover." Dylan grinned. Refurbishment was always a good sign. Years ago, when Dylan was starting work as a junior in high school, his father had given him several excellent tips. "Couple of things to look for, kid," his father had drawled around a cigarette. "First, when you're out chasing tail with your buddies at night, drive by the factories. See what companies are running second and third shifts. They're always hiring. Same thing on the weekend. Look at the parking lots. If they've got a Saturday and a Sunday shift, they need bodies. Second, look for companies that are adding on to their buildings, or putting on roofs, or getting carpeting done. Means they're making money. Successful, even if for only a little bit. And last, when you land an interview, and you will, you show up at least 15 minutes early. That way, they know you want the job." Dylan smiled as he thought of his father. The man had been rough and heavy with the discipline, but he had always supported Dylan in everything he tried to do. "Don't worry, Dad. he thought. "I'll stop by the cemetery and let you know how the salary conversation went." Taking a deep breath, Dylan pushed the door open and stepped into the lobby. The first thing he noticed was the strong, pleasant odor of pipe tobacco in the air, as though someone had just finished smoking a pipe before he had entered. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Dylan saw new carpeting and beautiful dark wood paneling, most of which was finished. Brass fixtures hung from the ceilings and were evenly placed along the completed panels. Marble columns rose up to and reflected the soft light thrown by the hanging lights. Dylan shook his head at the beauty of what was finished and the potential of what waited. His eyes wandered to the end of the lobby, where a pair of beautiful silver filigree doors to an elevator stood. A matching half-circle of silver and bakelite was mounted above the center of the elevator's entrance. The half-circle consisted of 4 angled chambers, each bearing a Roman numeral, 1 through 4. Dylan looked around for some sort of directory and found it by the front door. Anthropophagi, LLC, was listed as the sole occupant of the 4th floor. Not taking the stairs and sweating before an interview, Dylan thought. So, on to the elevator I go. He walked down to the elevator, pressed the up button, and stepped back, surprised as the doors opened faster than he had expected. When he entered the car, Dylan pressed the button for the 4th floor and examined the exquisite Art Deco work there. It consisted primarily of a repeating image of a monstrous entity devouring an entire village of people. Each detail was disturbingly clear. Even the horror on the miniature faces was plainly visible, and it left Dylan shaken as the elevator came to a gentle stop and the doors hissed open. Putting his hand on his satchel for comfort, Dylan was surprised to find himself in a small lobby. There were several large leather chairs placed on either side of a frosted glass door, upon which was stenciled Anthropophagi, LLC, in beautiful gold letters. What Dylan found strange as he looked at the glass was that the business didn't place either its phone number or email address on it. Maybe it's part of their whole revitalization project, he thought, crossing the room to knock on the door. An old speaker mounted above the frame and to the left squawked, and a gentleman asked, "Yes, may I help you?" Dylan resisted the urge to look around for the camera the man must have been using, and answered, "Hello, I'm Dylan Kessel. I'm supposed to meet with Mr. Hurst this morning at 6:30. "Mr. Kessel," the unseen gentleman said in a tone of excitement. "How wonderful! You're early. My goodness, a full 20 minutes early. You know, I was telling my business partner, Jonathan, that I thought you would be excellent for this position. Oh my, I'm leaving you in the lobby. Come in, come in." There was a click, and the door to the company opened. Chuckling, Dylan hurried forward and pushed the door open, closing it softly behind him. He found himself in a beautiful room with tall bookcases, all carved from the same dark wood as the paneling in the main lobby. The shelves were packed with books, and it was only as Dylan was admiring them that he realized the room was round. In the center of it was a large, ornately carved desk. Behind the desk was an equally ornate and disturbingly large chair. In it was a man. He didn't know if he was looking at Mr. Hurst or the gentleman's partner, but Dylan knew without a doubt that the person in front of him was the oldest human being he had ever laid his eyes on. The stranger's face was sunken, the cheekbones standing out with all the gentleness of a hatchet. His eyes were hidden in shadows, and his sparse white hair was combed back, away from his forehead. He wore a black suit that accentuated his thinness, and his long, narrow fingers were pressed tip to tip. The stranger leaned forward and smiled, his thin lips pulling back to reveal long teeth. "Good morning, Mr. Kessel," the stranger said. "My name is Jonathan Hurst. Won't you sit down?" Dillon had a strange and instant dislike for Mr. Hurst, but he shook it off as he found a chair to sit down in. "Is that your portfolio?" Mr. Hurst asked, his voice polite and tinged with curiosity. "It is, sir," Dillon replied. He took it from his shoulder, leaned across the desk, and handed it to the old man. Mr. Hurst let out a long, pleasant sigh, his fingers almost caressing the leather. Then, with movements far quicker than Dillon would have expected, the old man opened the satchel. He removed the paintings and spread them out over his desk, moving them about gently, arranging them in a way Dillon grudgingly admired. He knows colors, Dillon thought, and how they should go, naturally. "You've a remarkable talent with oil," Mr. Hurst stated, after a moment, smiling his cold, strange smile up at Dillon. "Your brush strokes are impeccable." "Thank you," Dillon smiled. How the hell can he see that? The photos aren't that high resolution. "Yes," Mr. Hurst murmured. "Oh, yes. These are stunning. Your talent. Well, it's not quite recognized, is it?" Dillon felt the same way, but he didn't want to seem immodest, so he refrained from responding. Mr. Hurst chuckled and straightened up. "Well, let me bring my partner in. I believe you were speaking with him via the speaker system, were you not?" "I believe I was, sir," Dillon confirmed. "Excellent. Yes. Hold on." Mr. Hurst picked up his phone, an old rotary, and dialed a single number. "Ah, Mr. Sanborn. Yes, he is ready for your input in the matter of salary, etc. If you would be so kind as to join us." "Excellent. We will see you shortly." Mr. Hurst hung up the phone and smiled again at Dillon. It was a smile that set Dillon's teeth on edge. He managed to not squirm in his seat as he waited for Mr. Sanborn. Time ticked by, and Dillon kept still. Finally, the familiar squawk of a speaker coming to life interrupted Dillon's thoughts. "Mr. Kessel," Mr. Sanborn's voice came from the speaker. "How are you? I am so very excited to have you here. I cannot, in all honesty, express how excited I was when Mr. Hurst showed your paintings and illustrations to me. There, I told him, is the work of a true artist. Did I not say that, Jonathan?" "You did indeed, Robert," Mr. Hurst replied. "Thank you, sir," Dillon responded. Is he going to interview me from another room? "Now," Mr. Sanborn continued, "I suppose you're wondering why I'm not in the room with you." "The thought had crossed my mind, sir," Dillon admitted. "Of course it had," Mr. Sanborn said, and the two chuckled over some private joke. "Well," Mr. Sanborn continued, "let's end end this little charade and get down to brass tacks, shall we? Yes, Dillon agreed, feeling his heart begin to race. We are happy to offer you immortality, Mr. Sanborn stated. Dillon waited a moment to see if they were joking, but Mr. Sanborn's silence and the intensity of the expression on Mr. Hurst's face told him otherwise. I see that you doubt the sincerity of our statement, Mr. Sanborn stated over the intercom. Well, sir, Dillon replied, keeping his voice calm, I was under the impression that I was coming here for a job, with a salary and a benefits package, which you stated in your email to me. You are exactly correct, Mr. Hurst agreed. In addition to monetary compensation and the benefits required to live a successful life, we are offering you immortality. Here at Anthropophagy, we are able to provide a unique benefit, and that is, quite literally, immortality. Although, to be honest, it is not quite in the way most people understand the definition. I agree, Jonathan, Mr. Sanborn said. You see, Mr. Castle, the structure you are in, it is an entity unto itself. You would be working for it, and for no other. Dillon sighed and shook his head, his face burning bright red as he stood up. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I think you've mistaken me for a fool. Mr. Hurst, if I could have my paintings and illustrations back, please? Mr. Hurst smiled at him. No. The response caused Dillon's heart to skip a beat. I'm sorry? No, Mr. Hurst repeated. You may certainly not have them back. They belong to us now, as do you. I don't think you understand your position, Mr. Kessel. You are part of Anthropophagy now. This is not up for discussion. The hell it isn't, Dillon snapped. Give me back my damned art. Your art has certainly damned you, Mr. Sanborn said, sympathetically. What? Dillon asked, glaring at the speaker. If you weren't quite so good, Mr. Sanborn continued, we never would have asked you to come here. So, in all actuality, you're the one to blame. You are simply too talented to let go, Mr. Kessel. Therefore, Mr. Hurst added, we have no intention of letting you go. Furious, Dillon jerked his cell phone out of his pocket, turned it on, and was horrified to see he had no service. Ah, a curious fact about this building, Mr. Hurst said. There is no internet connection here, nor is there any sort of wireless service. I was required to go to the library and email you. We knew you were the right one, you know, Mr. Sanborn stated. You see, you were the very, very first person to respond to our email, and with such exquisite art. I'll call the police when I get out of here, Dillon decided, his mind racing. Gentlemen, Dillon's voice trembled as he spoke. I am going to leave now. I'm sorry there's been so much confusion. You can't leave. Mr. Sanborn's voice was cool and determined. We already informed you of that." Dillon stood and looked from the intercom to Mr. Hurst. Is Sanborn as old as Hurst? He sounds it. I can get out of here without any real trouble. Forcing himself to smile, Dillon said, "As I said, I'm sorry, but I am leaving." "Mr. Kessel." Dillon turned and looked at Mr. Hurst, who was smiling at him with long, wicked teeth. "You're not leaving, my good man. No one ever does." "Sure," Dillon muttered. He went to the door and let himself out. It clicked shut behind him, and Dillon's body shook as he hurried to the elevator. But the elevator was gone. As the realization dawned on him that only a blank wall stood where the elevator doors had let him out, the entire building quivered. The motion threw Dillon off balance, and he stumbled forward, catching himself on the wall. He let out a horrified yell and jerked his hands back. The wall had been unnaturally warm, and for the split second there was contact, Dillon was certain he had felt an obscene pulse. He looked over his shoulder, afraid that someone would be coming out of the door for him, and he nearly fainted. The doorway he had just exited was easily 100 feet away. "The whole damned building isn't 100 feet long," Dillon thought, his heart racing. He twisted to either side of him, looking for windows or doors, any way in which he might exit. But there was nothing, only the dark wood paneling and the brass fixtures, identical to those in the lobby on the first floor. "Mr. Kessel!" Mr. Sanborn's voice came from everywhere at once. No longer was it tinged with imagined infirmities and age. Instead, it was a thriving, powerful voice, and fear spiked through Dillon's heart. "Mr. Kessel," Mr. Sanborn repeated, "I want you to know that if you run, well, it will only make the end much more difficult to bear. It is extremely hard, I might add, to distill such talent as yours from a brain flooded with emotions. Fear, while it has been known to motivate some artists, doesn't seem to be a primary ingredient to your art. Therefore, Mr. Hurst and I humbly request that you calm yourself. Perhaps a drink or two?" With the question, there was a soft groan and hiss. As Dillon watched, a portion of the wall on his left bulged, sank, expanded again, and then separated along a seam. From the opening, a shelf appeared, pushed forward from a darkness he couldn't see. The shelf widened, grew in depth, and then split open like the hinged top of a box. A light flickered into life, and from where he stood, Dillon could see a decanter of deep amber liquor and a tumbler. "I can assure you," Mr. Sanborn stated, "that this bourbon is the finest on the eastern seaboard." "Indeed," came Mr. Hurst's voice from above. "In 1893, we acquired a gentleman who was a prodigy in regards to distilling. This is a product of his exceptional mind." "What the hell is this place?" Dillon whispered, fear building within him. "This is a studio," Mr. Sanborn declared proudly. "The finest place for artists to work," Mr. Hurst added. "Yes," Mr. Sanborn continued, "we've been gathering artists of all sorts for centuries. This building, we found, suits all of our needs. Oh, if you only knew the engineers and architects who came together to form this for us. To join us to this building, Mr. Hurst said. We are as much a part of this building as the artists are. More, I would think, Jonathan, Mr. Sanborn chuckled. My goodness, to think of the different forms we confiscated before this magnificent structure. The two unseen creatures laughed, and Dillon fought the urge to scream. Perhaps, Mr. Hurst mused after they had grown silent, you would prefer some music, Mr. Kessel. Oh, yes, Mr. Sanborn cried. We have a wonderful cellist. She was to have sat first chair for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. However, other issues came up, and she answered our ad, perhaps 15 years ago. Yes, I think that's right, Mr. Hurst agreed. Anyway, Mr. Sanborn said, listen to this. Dillon forced the sound of their voices out of his head. Think. Psychedelics in the air, something that makes all this seem real. Anything. The strains of Danse Macabre filled the air as if he was sitting in the studio with a cellist, and a horrific thought leaped forward. What if it's true? His eyes darted around the room. What if everything they're saying is true? Sweat beaded on the back of his neck, and his palms became clammy. He shook his head and looked from where the elevator had been to the door to Mr. Hurst's office. With a terrified scream, Dillon broke into a run. The music ended abruptly, and voices shouted at him. Dillon slammed into the door and then wrenched it open. It was no longer Mr. Hurst's office, but the elevator. Screaming triumphantly, Dillon slammed the door closed behind him and fumbled with the locks he found there. The elevator was dark, except for the lights on the buttons and that light that filtered in through the frosted glass. Dillon's hands shook as he reached out and pressed the first floor button. Nothing happened. He pushed it again, and Mr. Hurst's voice filled the elevator. Mr. Kessel, Mr. Hurst began. Well, Dillon. May I call you Dillon? Dillon didn't respond. My dear boy, Mr. Hurst said, you simply cannot go home. It isn't possible. You're not even going to make it to the first floor lobby. Don't you understand that? Dillon's response was to slam his hand against the button. Now, Mr. Sanborn murmured, you needn't be so violent. We do feel, in case you didn't know. You wouldn't like it if we stomped around your innards, would you? Let me go! Dillon screamed, slapping all of the buttons. Let me out of here! The two creatures chuckled. Come now, Mr. Hurst laughed. You're a big lad. Why are you carrying on like this? Dillon closed his mouth and shook his head. You don't want to go to the lobby, Mr. Sanborn said. I promise you that, Dillon. I want to go home, Dillon whispered. We're trying to tell you, Mr. Hurst sighed. You are home. Dillon threw himself at the door and slammed his fists into it, but they only bounced off of the glass. It was as though the composition of the window had changed. When he finally finished and sagged to the floor, he heard the two creatures murmuring. After several minutes, one of them muttered, "Suppose that's it, then?" "It seems like it," Mr. Hurst grumbled. Without another word, the elevator shook and shuddered. Dillon stared at the numbers above the door in amazement. He watched as the numbers descended from 4 to 1. A sense of joy filled him, and when the elevator came to a stop, his hands fumbled at the locks. When the last one was undone, he threw open the door and stepped out into the half-finished lobby. Dillon's entire body shook with relief as he staggered forward. Halfway to the exit, his foot snagged on something. Dillon caught himself before he fell, and he was able to look down and see what had caused it. Fibers from the carpet were wrapped around his Oxford dress shoe. As he watched, the strands curled up and over, interlocking and securing his shoe to the floor. For another 30 seconds, Dillon watched the carpet encase his shoe. And then he realized, belatedly, what was happening. He tried to take off his shoe, but the fibers were already stitching themselves into his sock. His entire foot was held in place, and a second later, Dillon understood the same was happening to his other foot. Screaming, he clawed at the carpet, but to no avail. Nothing he did stopped it. Raising his fist to try and smash the carpeting with sheer force, Dillon called out in terror as something looped around his hand. Peering up, he saw wires snaking down from the ceiling. One had looped around his wrist and pulled it taut toward the flaking paint above him. Dillon reached up with his free hand and tried to pry the wire off, but one of the strands broke free and bound both of his hands together. The wiring shifted in the ceiling, and soon his hands were held directly above his head. Dillon shook himself, trying to free his body by ripping the wiring down with his own weight. Nothing happened. "I do so hate it when they get this upset," Mr. Sanborn declared from behind Dillon. "I agree," Mr. Hurst said. "However, we always agreed we would offer them the opportunity to go willingly." "True, Mr. Sanborn acknowledged. "He's trying to get a look at us," Mr. Hurst chuckled. "Of course," Mr. Sanborn said. "He's an artist. He wants to know what's happening." "He thinks he wants to know," Mr. Hurst corrected. "I disagree." As do I, Mr. Sanborn said. "Well, what do you think? In through the back or in through the front?" "I would start with the back," Mr. Hurst decided, after a moment of silent contemplation. "He might well go into cardiac arrest, and really, we don't want him to become like poor John Wukovitz, do we?" "Oh, the sculptor!" Mr. Sanborn sighed. "Alas, no. That poor man. All the work we put into recruiting him, and he drove himself mad. Did we ever catch him? I can't remember." "No," Mr. Hurst said. "Occasionally I catch sight of some of his work. He left a darling sculpture of a squirrel in the attic. Oh, I don't know. 5 years ago? Maybe 6? "Definitely 6, Mr. Sanborn said. "Well, enough reminiscing. We can do that when we introduce Mr. Kessel to the other artists." "True," Mr. Hurst chuckled. "Oh, well, I would ask you, Dillon, if you're ready, but I can assure you that you are not." "Not at all," Mr. Sanborn murmured. "A pity, too." Dillon tried to beg, but his pleas transformed into shrieks as something sharp and thin slipped into his spine.